Beneath a hill in central China, there is a tomb that has been sealed for 2,200 years. Inside, according to ancient texts confirmed by modern soil tests, flow rivers of liquid mercury, mechanically engineered to simulate China's greatest waterways. The ceiling is inlaid with gems to represent the stars, and hidden throughout the chamber, automatic crossbows, still armed, still loaded, ready to kill anyone who walks through the door. Archaeologists know exactly where it is. They have the technology to find it, and they are terrified to open it. That's just one of the secrets China has been sitting on for thousands of years, and we're going inside all of them today. The civilization nobody talks about. Most people think Chinese civilization began along the Yellow River, a single cradle, a single origin story, spreading outward from there. That idea is wrong, and we have known it is wrong since 1929, when a farmer digging a pond in Sichuan province hit something hard in the earth and pulled up a piece of jade. That accidental discovery opened a window into a civilization that had been buried for over 3,000 years. A civilization that nobody knew existed, that fits nowhere in the official story of how China began, and that is still, today, only partially understood. But we will get to that. First, let's understand just how old this story actually is. People have lived in the land we now call China for at least 1.7 million years. Stone tools and human teeth found at a site in Yuanmo have been dated to that almost incomprehensible age. The civilization we recognize, cities, writing, dynasties, emerged much later, around 5,000 years ago, along the Yellow and Yangtze rivers. But here is the thing your history teacher probably never told you. For most of Chinese history, there was no single China. There were dozens of competing kingdoms, rival empires, and separate civilizations, all existing simultaneously, all developing their own cultures, technologies, and beliefs. The China that most people picture, unified, centralized, ruled from a single capital, was actually only created once, by a single man, through an act of conquest so brutal and so visionary that it permanently changed the shape of civilization. And that man was so obsessed with not dying that he almost certainly killed himself, trying to live forever. The man who unified China and went mad trying to live forever. His name was Ying Zheng. He became king of the state of Qin at age 13, and by the time he was 38, he had conquered every rival kingdom in China and declared himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, a title he invented himself because no previous title was grand enough. What he built in 15 years of rule would shape China for the next 2,000 years. He standardized the written language so that people across a vast empire who spoke different dialects could all read and write the same characters. He standardized weights, measures, and the axle widths of carts, so goods could flow freely across the empire. He built a road network connecting every corner of his territory. He began the first version of what would eventually become the Great Wall. He was, by any measure, one of the most consequential rulers in human history. And he was also, by the end of his life, completely unhinged with terror of death. He sent expeditions across the seas, searching for mythical islands where the elixir of immortality was said to grow. His ministers sent back reports of herbs found on auspicious mountains. Villages assured him they were still searching. One expedition of hundreds of young men and women sailed east and never returned. Some historians believe they landed in Japan. He consulted alchemists. He swallowed pills of mercury, which his doctors told him would grant eternal life, and which were almost certainly slowly poisoning him. He refused to speak the word death. He travelled constantly because he believed assassins could not kill a moving target, and because 3 separate assassination attempts had already failed. He died at 49, possibly from mercury poisoning. His body was transported back to the capital in a cart surrounded by wagons of rotting fish, to disguise the smell of the decomposing emperor from his own court until his chosen successor could be put in place. And his tomb, the underground empire he had been building since he was 13 years old, was sealed above him, its secrets intact. Before we open that tomb, metaphorically, since nobody has literally opened it in 2,200 years, hit that like button if this is already the most interesting history class you've ever had. Subscribe if you're new. We do this every week. Now, let's talk about what is actually inside that hill in Shanxi province, and why the world's best archaeologists are still too afraid to find out. The Forbidden Tomb, Rivers of Mercury, and Automatic Crossbows. In 1974, farmers digging a well near the city of Xi'an in Shanxi province hit something hard. They pulled up a fragment of a human figure made from fired clay. What lay beneath that field turned out to be one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in human history. An army of over 8,000 life-size terracotta soldiers, each one individually sculpted with unique facial features, unique armor, unique weapons, arranged in precise military formation, pointing toward a large hill 1.5 miles away. That hill is the tomb of Qin Shi Huang. The terracotta army was just the outer guard, the outermost ring of protection. An ancient historian named Sima Qian, writing about a century after the emperor's death, described what lay inside the hill itself. And his account reads like something from a fever dream. 700,000 workers constructed a vast underground palace. The ceiling of the burial chamber was inlaid with pearls and precious stones to represent the constellations of the night sky. The floor was a scale model of the entire empire, mountains, plains, and cities rendered in miniature. And flowing through that miniature landscape were rivers of liquid mercury, mechanically engineered to simulate the flow of the Yangtze and the Yellow River, circulating endlessly through the sealed chamber. Ancient crossbows were mounted throughout the tomb, set to fire automatically at any intruder who broke the seals. For 2,000 years, this account was treated as legend, poetic exaggeration, the kind of thing ancient historians wrote to glorify dead emperors. Then, scientists tested the soil above the tomb. They found mercury concentrations dozens of times higher than normal, and the distribution pattern of that mercury in the earth mirrors the river systems of ancient China almost exactly. The account was not legend. The rivers of mercury are real. The tomb itself has never been opened, not because nobody wants to open it, but because nobody yet knows how to do it without destroying what is inside. When archaeologists first excavated the terracotta warriors, the figures had been painted in vivid colors. Within minutes of exposure to open air, the paint began to flake and dissolve. They had to stop. They still have not fully solved the preservation problem, and that was just paint on clay. Inside the sealed burial chamber, after 2,200 years of perfect preservation, are objects, textiles, wooden structures, lacquerwork, organic materials that would disintegrate almost instantly on contact with outside air. And potentially, depending on what has happened to the mercury over 2 millennia, archaeologists could be walking into a toxic chamber. As one archaeologist who led excavations at the site put it, there are no mature technologies and no effective measures yet available to protect what lies inside. The tomb will remain sealed until the science catches up. Qin Shi Huang, the man who could not stop death, may have achieved a kind of immortality after all. His secrets are still his. The pyramids of China, larger than Giza, that the government kept secret. Here is something that should be far more famous than it is. Near the city of Xi'an in Shanxi province, the same region where the terracotta army was found, There are approximately 400 pyramids. Not small burial mounds, pyramids. Massive four-sided earthen structures, many of them larger than the famous pyramids of Egypt. The largest of them, sometimes called the Great White Pyramid, is estimated to stand over 300 meters tall. The Great Pyramid of Giza is 147 meters. For decades in the 20th century, the Chinese government classified this area as a restricted zone, a no-go area for foreign researchers. The pyramids were acknowledged to the wider world only in the year 2000. Officially, they are described as the tombs of ancient Chinese emperors, the Han Dynasty equivalent of royal burial mounds. But the full story is more complicated. Buddhist monks in the region kept records referring to the pyramids as very ancient, so ancient that even 5,000 years ago, the texts described them as old, built in the time of emperors who claimed to be descended from the sons of heaven. The largest pyramid has never been excavated. The government has repeatedly declined requests for detailed study, citing the desire to preserve cultural heritage. Satellite imaging has given researchers some information about their size and layout. Ground-penetrating radar has suggested complex internal structures, but the interiors remain unknown. 400 pyramids, some of the largest structures ever built by human hands, and we know almost nothing about what is inside them. Sanxingdui, the lost civilization that rewrote Chinese history. Now, back to that farmer who pulled a piece of jade out of his pond in 1929. That discovery led, decades later, to one of the most extraordinary archaeological sites ever excavated, a place called Sanxingdui in Sichuan province. And what was found there has never been fully explained. In 1986, full excavation of the site began. Archaeologists expected to find artifacts consistent with what they already knew about ancient Chinese culture. What they found instead looked like nothing from any known Chinese civilization. Giant bronze masks with enormous protruding eyes, eyes that bulge outward from the face in a way that appears on nothing else in Chinese art before or after this period. A bronze figure, nearly 2 meters tall, standing on a massive pedestal, the largest bronze human figure ever found from the ancient world. A bronze tree almost 4 meters high, hung with jade leaves and fruit. Golden masks, elephant tusks by the hundreds, jade discs and tablets inscribed with symbols nobody has yet deciphered. The artifacts date to around 1200 BC, the same era as the Shang dynasty further north along the Yellow River. But the Sanxingdui people had no connection to Shang culture. No shared symbols, no shared artistic tradition, no shared writing system. They appear to have developed entirely independently, in complete isolation from the civilization that most history books present as the origin of China. And then they vanished. Around 1000 BC, the Sanxingdui culture simply disappears from the archaeological record. No invasion, no clear evidence of natural disaster, no gradual decline visible in the artifacts. They were there, and then they were gone. In 2021, a new round of excavations uncovered 6 additional burial pits at Sanxingdui, packed with thousands more artifacts, gold masks, bronze vessels, ivory, many of them still being analysed. Every new find raises more questions than it answers. Who were these people? Where did their extraordinary artistic tradition come from? Where did they go? And how many other civilizations like them, unknown, unsuspected, waiting underground, are still out there beneath the soil of China? What do you think happened to the Sanxingdui people? A natural disaster? Did they migrate? Or is there an explanation we haven't found yet? Drop your theory in the comments. I read every single one, and this one genuinely has no consensus answer, even among archaeologists. And subscribe if you haven't already. We go this deep every week. The Roman soldiers who may have become Chinese. In 36 BC, A Han Dynasty general named Chen Tang led a military campaign against a confederation of enemies in Central Asia, near the region of modern-day Turkmenistan. Among the forces he defeated, his account describes a unit of soldiers fighting in a formation he had never seen before, a formation that Roman military historians would immediately recognize as the tortoise, the famous Roman testudo, where soldiers lock shields above and around them to form a moving armoured box. This was deep Central Asia. Rome was thousands of miles away. No Roman army had any business being there. And yet the formation was unmistakable to anyone who knew Roman military tactics. The leading theory is this. In 53 BC, the Roman general Marcus Crassus, one of the richest men in Roman history, led an army against the Parthian Empire in one of Rome's most catastrophic military defeats at the Battle of Carrhae. Over 10,000 Roman soldiers were captured. Most were sent to work as labourers on Parthia's eastern frontier, which placed them directly in the path of the expanding conflict between various Central Asian powers that would, 17 years later, put a unit of strange shield-locking soldiers in front of a Han Dynasty general. After Chen Tang's victory, some of those captured soldiers are believed to have been settled in a garrison town called Liqian in what is now Gansu province in northwestern China. And today, in the villages around that area, there are Chinese people with unusually high rates of Caucasian physical features, lighter eyes, taller builds, features that do not fit the surrounding population. DNA studies have been conducted. The results are genuinely intriguing, but not conclusive. The Chinese government has not exactly rushed to fund further research into this particular question, but the possibility stands. In a village in northwestern China, there may be people who are the distant descendants of Roman legionaries, soldiers of the empire that built the Colosseum, carried eagles into battle, and spoke Latin, who ended up, by an extraordinary chain of events spanning continents and decades, settling down in China and never going home. How China survived everything and what it cost. Here is the thread that runs through all of this history. China has been invaded, divided, conquered, and rebuilt more times than almost any civilization on Earth. The Mongols swept through in the 13th century and killed tens of millions, a destruction so total that entire regions of northern China were left essentially empty. The Manchu Qing dynasty conquered the Han Chinese in the 17th century and ruled for over 250 years. Japan invaded in the 20th century and committed atrocities on a scale that still defines relations between the two countries today. And through all of it, the language survived. The written characters that Qingshi Huang standardized 2,200 years ago are still, in their evolved form, the characters used by over 1 billion people today. The Confucian social structures he tried to destroy were so deeply embedded that they outlasted every attempt at erasure. The artistic traditions, jade carving, bronze casting, calligraphy, silk weaving, survived invasion, revolution, and cultural upheaval across 5 millennia. China was not just a place that survived, it was a civilization so deeply rooted that it absorbed everything that tried to replace it. The Mongols who conquered China became, within a few generations, Chinese. The Manchu conquerors adopted Chinese customs, Chinese court rituals, Chinese language, Chinese art. Every conqueror became part of China, not the other way around. But that survival came at a cost that is rarely discussed. The Great Wall, that symbol of Chinese civilization known around the world, was built on the labour of hundreds of thousands of workers, many of whom died and were buried within its structure. The Terracotta Army was created by workers who, according to ancient accounts, were sealed inside the tomb upon its completion to take its secrets to their graves. Every dynasty that rose did so on the memory of the dynasty it destroyed. China's history is 5,000 years of extraordinary creation and extraordinary cruelty, inseparably wound together. A civilization that built some of the most beautiful things in human history and paid for them in ways that history has often preferred not to examine too closely. Here is what stays with me after going deep into China's hidden history. There is a tomb in Shanxi province where rivers of Mercury still flow in the dark, where automatic crossbows are still aimed at a door that has not opened in 2,200 years, where a man who was terrified of death lies in an underground palace he designed to rule from forever. There is a field in Sichuan where bronze figures with impossible eyes stared at the sky for 3,000 years before anyone found them, the last traces of a people whose name we do not know, whose language we cannot read, and whose disappearance we cannot explain. There may be a village in Gansu where the faces of Roman soldiers look out from behind Chinese eyes. And there are 400 pyramids in a restricted zone that the world was not allowed to know about for most of the 20th century, whose insides remain a mystery, built for reasons we still cannot fully explain. China is not just the world's oldest continuous civilization, it is the world's deepest unsolved mystery. And we are still, only just, beginning to understand what is buried there. If this video changed how you see China, or history, share it with one person. That is all it takes. Subscribe if you haven't yet. New video every week. Drop your biggest takeaway in the comments. What hit you hardest? The rabbit hole is